I'll read out the first question. We don't want to waste time. The first question is, and this is direct to Dr. Amit. Post Balakot airstrike, Air Chief Dhanoa has repeatedly mentioned that airstrike capability of India is such that it would be able to take on two-pronged war with a clause that if Rafale is inducted. What is your remarks regarding the Indian preparedness in response to that kind of emergency situation? Yeah, go ahead. Just answer this. This is directed to you, Amit.
Right, sir. Yeah, so then it will be based on the scale of how much we are going to upscale the response as it is. Otherwise, what retired Chief Marshal has said stands, and we are quite capable. So if the contingency is the question, we will probably need to scale it higher as a response is considered. Rafale reduces that upscaling requirement.
Thank you. Again, from Majumdar to Professor Rajiv, do you think the recent stress that China has been passing on to India is also an attempt to pressurize India in terms of economic resources, knowing that it cannot expand the defense budget substantially for some time now, owing to the present COVID-19 situation? How do we tackle this angle or constraint, if I may say? Rajiv. Go ahead. We can't hear you. We can't hear you. We can't hear you.
I think maybe. Am I audible now, sir?
Yes, you are.
Okay. So I don't think is there anything that China is pressurizing India on, at least on economic front. So maybe China want to trigger or want to engage in this border clash to pressurize China to move a kind of away from US, or try to not to engage in China bashing. But I don't think, because if we see the whole India-China bilateral trade is tilted in the favor of China. So I don't think, and then we have whole set of Huawei 5G is coming up, and there is it's India was trying discussing about allowing 5G into India, but we have seen yesterday that India has already asked MTNL and BSNL to remove all the Huawei parts and equipment from BSNL and MTNL 4G installation. So I don't think is anywhere. I think is China is trying to pressurize about economic. Even if that India has already modified its investment policy and tried to kind of restrict Chinese to invest in India, but I don't think there is a link between the modification in FDI and then the border clash that we are experiencing. So I don't think there is a direct link. But of course, we can say that there is a link between on how, if India is participating in a political containing China, and then one can say that India can pressurize, or maybe this is the one of the way for China to tell that what the Professor Kanti Bajpayee is saying, that don't try to change the status quo, don't try to bash against us. But I don't think it's a whole set of economic, because economic interest is where the Chinese are on upper hand, and they are one who is trying to exploit our whole economic trade. So I would end here.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. So next question is from Professor Rajaram Nagappa. It is aimed at myself, and he's asking, as what can we do, a proactive steps that can put China on the back foot? Very good question, I must say. What we can do is what we should have done before, but the option is always open to us. Because what we should have done immediately following the discovery of the fact that the Chinese have bit off in the sense that they have taken control of a territory on a quasi-permanent basis, which control they didn't have before, because these were territory where our patrols went and their patrols also came, a part of the disputed area. But now they've taken control and prevented us from going there. So that is so there is a shift in territorial control. What we should have done, in my view, was what the Indian Army has been practicing as its bread and butter for now more than a decade, not more, which is we do the same thing somewhere else, for which we have actually, I told you, it's a bread and butter, but it requires political clearance. And there is enough places along the Sino-Indian border where we can go and sit. It is not occupied. Most of the border is not occupied. The Chinese are quite far behind. You can do that and do the same thing. It's called a quid pro quo. And then start talking to them. Now they have bitten off in 2 or 3 places. We don't have anything to give back to them. So a bargaining power is less, purely in terms of territorial control. That would have put China at least on the back foot. In fact, that is what really happened in Dipsang, because the Chamar issue was actually by the fact that we did a little more than what the Chinese accepted. Finally, we bargained and resolved the issue. But now we don't have any bargaining capacity. But there's nothing stopping us from actually doing it one of these fine days, because yesterday the Prime Minister promised the country that he will give a suitable reply. So let's wait for the reply. So are there any questions? Wait, one more.
So there are 3 questions which I got through email.
Yeah.
The first one is to address to Rajiv. The question is from Aditya Krishna. The question is, does a dichotomy exist in terms of perspective on how the PLA and CPC view India? This is for Rajiv.
Rajiv, just 2 minutes, sir, because we are running short of time.
I would be sorry.
Rajiv, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't see PLA in inside. So like the whole how the PLA thinks about India, but given the fact that Xi Jinping is the supreme commander or the chairman of the CMC, so and even if there is certain different view within the PLC, I think it doesn't come out in the public, which is kind of opposite to what the Xi Jinping or the political leadership is thinking. Of course, there is a lot of strategic differences between the whole Chinese PLA leadership and the Chinese academia, but I don't know if that PLA and the political leadership discussion and debate on their view about India comes into the public domain. So I'm not a right person to answer of this question.
Okay.
So the second question, it's open-ended. It is from Avinash. What kind of technology advancement India needs to focus on in order to deter such border standoff from turning into a short battle? This is open-ended, so any panelist can answer this.
Yeah, I think I'll just take it on. Yeah, technology is actually a great, what you call force multiplier. It's part of a larger, what you call capacity which you actually develop. By itself, it exists so that it can inhabit other systems by which you can exploit the situation. So this is a broad question. Definitely technology must be used, must be our own, and we should actually be able to afford it. So that's the point.
So the third question, the last one which I got from email is, present India-China dispute on LAC, is there any role of BRICS country to resolve the issue? Because India and China played a vital role.
Role of whom?
BRICS.
BRICS.
Yes.
Okay.
Role for them, that's a question.
Yeah, there's no role at all. BRICS is actually at the moment moribund because of the problem between the partners itself. It wouldn't get involved in a crisis like this, although it's got Russia, China, and all of us in it, but they're not going to get involved in it. In fact, the question actually should be, what is the international involvement? If you really look at it, and somebody made it very clear, let's be very clear about one thing, that these sort of things which happen, firstly, what are the Chinese doing? They're not doing the big stuff, they're doing the small stuff. So that, that's what they did in all over South China Sea, so that the big guys cannot even think of interfering because the stuff is too small. And that is how they operate. So to expect that anybody else will come and help you in all this, I mean, that's wishful thinking. What they can help us, and especially the United States, is probably give us some sort of an intelligence sharing based on the sophistication of their satellite system and even their capability to monitor transmission. But that's an understanding which even if they have, we will never come to know in the public space. So there is space for that. So I think with that, may I just sum it up? And let me start by saying that I think it is important that we look from the top down to the incident so that we can see the largest space possible. If we start looking from Ladakh upwards to the regional and global sphere, we'll miss out a lot of things. So the view has to be broad. And when we look at that view, what is that view? The view is that the China behavior must be seen within the context of its major gameplay. The major gameplay is between the struggle for ascendancy and power between the United States of America and China. That is the big game. Everything else has to fit into this big game. And therefore, if you look at that big game, one of the things about India in that big game is India being big enough has the capacity to spoil China's game. And what is that game? That it can, if it wishes, tilt its weight on certain issues with the United States, and it would be difficult for China to reach that balance of power where it has an ascendancy. This has always been China's concern with us, that India can be the spoiler in that 2049 dream of China being the #1 power in the world. And India has that capacity. And therefore, if you look at all this from that point of view, you'll probably see a better picture. If you look at it at the ground level in Ladakh, then you'll come out with these arguments about infrastructure and so on. But let me tell you, the DBO road has taken 20 years to build. Only last year, we actually inaugurated the bridge over the Shiok River. We have many other roads which we have sanctioned more than 25 years ago. And with the pace of our, let's say, the Ministry of Defense in building these roads, we have still a far way to actually catch up with our plans. So our infrastructure building capacity on the northern borders has been woefully inadequate. And that infrastructure building capacity is first required to maintain ourselves, get closer to the border so we can sort of keep a surveillance. Now, otherwise we are very far away, there are no roads there. So this has been what we've been trying to catch up. Of course, there are a lot of theories going around that one of the reasons is that India will actually be threatening the Gilgit-Baltistan from that direction and actually link up and so on. Those are fantasies and they really don't have any weight. The DBO road was always vulnerable to Chinese because it runs parallel. There is no way that they will allow you, if there is a war, there's no way they'll allow you to use that road. But with what they have done in Galwan is, it gives them the ability to interdict it more than before. That's about all. And what they are doing in Pangangso is a continuation of something which started before. There was no track, then they built a road, now they've stopped us from going there. But what is the message they want to tell us? What is their concern? I think the concern is the China wants to tell us, we are boss. You better listen to us. Be careful. Don't go to the US because then we will be very concerned. Therefore, they have used the northern border as a place to suck in India's resources like they do with Pakistan. They support Pakistan so that India's resources actually goes to trying to contain Pakistan. They do the same with the northern border. And what are they worried about? It's worried about India becoming a maritime power. And that is where they will not be able to match us because geography is on our side. Because the Indian subcontinent is like a dagger in the Indian Ocean. And that is where the white Chinese are concerned. And therefore, it makes a lot of sense for them to actually get us to waste a lot of money on the northern borders. There will never be a time when the entire northern border will be manned It's too long, it's too harsh, it's got too much of high altitude, it's impossible to do so. There will always be territory which will be unmanned, and probably we can increase our surveillance, but there is always the tyranny of terrain and the high altitude. So the small groups of people can come and sit anywhere. So to think that we can actually plug that gap in that manner is a fallacy. So what we have been doing till now is actually put Band-Aid on every situation so that the Chinese can repeat it again. And that's what's been happening. We need to stop that. The political leadership has to be cognizant of that. The issue is you deal with China in such a manner that they don't use this as the leverage. And for that, you have to look beyond even Galwan or Pangangso. You have to look at the larger gameplay. And then you'll try to probably be able to deal with them better. And the Chinese are bullies. So anybody who stands up to them, they'll take 2 steps backwards. Then they'll try after some time. This has been their pattern. And let us not believe that India is a pushover. And you know, people think and they compare to 1962. The Indian Armed Forces has come a long way. Even today in Ladakh, the amount of capability and military power there in Ladakh has never been there before. So the Chinese know that. But the Chinese play what we have to understand a psychological game, a game of psychological dominance. They use that power to affect the leadership, political leadership of our country. They have seen how we behaved after DOKLAM. See, some people still call it a victory, but actually we kept quiet. We acquiesced to Chinese aggression in DOKLAM. And they have got the message. So the Chinese are great people at mind play. We have to play in a similar manner. We have to disabuse them of that notion which they got that when it